Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Katsuyama, Japan. Today's a big day for the park. When we first started rebuilding this project, the goal was simple: fix and upgrade the carnivore park so we could continue to expand in the future. But today we're adding two smaller animals that I think help ground the park. Today we'll be creating a dedicated habitat that showcases one of the Earth's earliest predators, and then we'll be adding the newly brought back Dracorex to our campaign with its own dinosaur encounter experience. We've got new exhibits to build, new landscapes to design, and two incredible animals to introduce to the park, or reserve, or whatever this park is called. Still taking ideas. Anyways, let's start rebuilding here in Jurassic World Evolution 3. Forgive me if I accidentally called Dimetrodon a dinosaur throughout this video. In my defense, people have spent decades lumping Dimetrodons in with the dinosaurs, even though it lived long before the first true dinosaurs ever really appeared. Of course, the first thing everyone notices is the massive sail running along its back. It's one of the most recognizable features of any prehistoric animal, yet I still think Dimetrodon often gets overshadowed by some of its more famous prehistoric neighbors. Maybe that's because it doesn't have the sheer size of giant sauropods like Titanosaurus. Maybe it's because it doesn't have the star power of a Spinosaurus or a Tyrannosaurus, or soon to be Titanosaurus, or maybe it's because many people still assume it's just another dinosaur. Whatever the reason, I think Dimetrodon is one of the coolest additions we've got. Not only does it help tell a different chapter of prehistoric history, but it also gives us a reason to develop an area in this park that was previously untouched and mostly filled with trees. I decided to skip the viewing gallery once again. Yeah, I know, shocking. But in this case, I don't think one is necessary. Guests are already going to walk directly past this habitat as they make their way deeper into the park, which means they're going to have plenty of opportunities to see Dimetrodon without needing a dedicated viewing structure. From a park flow perspective, the layout's starting to come together nicely. Guests enter the park, can choose to visit the Spinosaurus exhibit, continue past our herbivore valleys featuring the Triceratops and the Stegosauruses, and then arrive here at the Dimetrodon habitat before heading towards the rest of the park, which, as you'll soon see, is still very much a work in progress. If you missed last week's video where we rebuilt and expanded several of those other habitats, feel free to pause this one and go check it out. It's about 15 minutes long and serves as the official kickoff of this park's rebuild. What started as a fun few side projects to revisit and improve some of these campaign parks has kind of taken on a life of its own. Because of that, I've created a dedicated playlist here on the channel that includes all the rebuild and expansion episodes for these parks. We'll continue to add to this playlist as we work our way through the remaining parks, introducing new dinosaurs, redesigning habitats, and making improvements along the way. Then once we've completed the full tour, I'll put together a showcase montage featuring every park as a way to wrap up this chapter and see just how much we've evolved since the original campaign. We continue getting better and better over time as we're creating more of these parks and these enclosures here, and one thing that I wanted to try here with the Dimetrodon was making something else to hide the fences here. I don't like when I feel like a lot of the gates are visible to a lot of our guests here in some of these parks, and so for this I wanted to try to find ways to hide or to mask those gates that get into some of these enclosures so they don't feel as much like just a traditional gate for our guests. So we'll do that for here with the Dimetrodon. We'll also do a little bit of that with the Dracorex as well. But this is just another fun addition to create some smaller, or I guess it's actually a little bit bigger, but some buildings in here in our park to fill out a little bit of the space without feeling like we're just building things for the sake of building. I think for a few of these enclosures here, like the Dimetrodon, I wanted to keep some of the interior of it very simple. It's really easy to try to make every single enclosure something that feels grandiose or large or amazing, and I think that sometimes when you do that with every single enclosure, they start to lose a little bit of that pizzazz that some of these have. So sometimes having these simpler enclosures that we can just walk by as guests and as people are going through the park, I think adds a little bit more of that authenticity or that realism that we want to see in parks like this. That being said, I definitely don't think that these are perfect by any means, so if you have other tips or tricks or things that you've done to really make your parks come to life, would love to hear a little more about that in the comments. If you do like this video, feel free to hit that like button or that subscribe button as we're going to continue to go through this park and many others as we continue to go back through all of our campaign parks here. You can see the outside of our Dimetrodon enclosure here is all built out. We'll need to play a little bit with the environment needs, but first we just need to get our Dimetrodons into our enclosure here to really see what we need to do to make them happy in this space here. Fortunately, or unfortunately, or however you want to look at it, the environment needs for this Dimetrodon actually expand outside of the enclosure itself. They can't get out of it, but it does show that their territory is technically a little bit larger than that. I don't know if you call that cheating in a campaign playthrough, but it definitely helps us with some of the environment needs here, and we can get away with now playing with a lot more of like the barren rocks and other things that traditionally Dimetrodon doesn't need. One thing that was a little challenging for me this time is I have a large space here with some of this deep water, but since there's nothing on the backside of it for the Dimetrodons to get to, it doesn't register as much deep water as I would have liked, so I needed to play a little bit more with the shallow water here to make the Dimetrodon happy in its enclosure. I knew we were going to build something for Dracorex, but my biggest challenge was trying to figure out what it would be. I ended up landing on a dinosaur encounter building, and you won't see it here, I think I started the building 6 or 7 different times, and I kept getting frustrated and deleting it. I think my problem was that I kept stopping too soon, and I didn't let it fully come together. And I think this is a lesson for a lot of builders as we're trying to make buildings and structures. They take a while, but you can't always know if you like it or you hate it until it's a little bit more complete. And for me, I needed to have this building play itself out a little bit more before I could really see everything coming together. And a lot of it, as I was doing it, came to just going off of feel and seeing pieces of it as it would slowly come together. A lot of people, when they're talking about building things, tell you gotta have a plan, and I have concepts of plans when I'm doing these, and I don't have everything fully baked out, and I think that's sometimes where it becomes a little more fun, and you gotta be a little more creative, and that's when things come together that you maybe weren't planning out to work one way, but it ended up, I think, turning out pretty well. I also got to be cognizant of the number of items we're putting in here because we are playing on console, and so we do not want to hit that complexity meter or get as close to 100%, and last time we were here in Japan, we definitely hit that, which made it a little more challenging. With the new added dynamic lights that I was able to turn on later, we can now play with having these little openings and different like viewing spaces inside our buildings here. And so what I ended up deciding on part of this as people are going up to the dinosaur encounter is we're going to have this little window in, and we'll have some foliage and maybe a statue of a dinosaur in here that people can look into. We don't have any statues of the Dracorex. We do have statues of the Pachycephalosaurus. Most people know Pachycephalosaurus. It's one of the largest and most famous members of this family. Pachycephalosaurus had an incredibly thick skull dome that may have been used for display, combat, or both. Dracorex looks very different. Instead of the giant dome, it had a flatter skull covered in spikes and knobs and horns. And when the first fossil was studied, scientists were pretty surprised, I think, with how dragon-like it appeared. It looked less like the traditional Pachycephalosaur and more like something out of Game of Thrones or something else like that, which is part of what helped it receive the name Dracorex. Regardless, the big question recently has been whether Dracorex was its own species or just a juvenile Pachycephalosaurus. The theory is that the animal aged, or as it aged, the skull changed. I'm not a scientist or a paleontologist, so I don't know for certain how that works, but the idea is that the younger individuals may have had flatter skulls with more prominent spikes, and then as they got older and they matured, the skull thickened and developed into the larger dome that we associate with the Pachycephalosaurus. And if that's true, then the Dracorex may be more of like that teenage phase of a much larger animal. And some people even think that it's Dracorex, Stygimoloch, and Pachycephalosaurus may all represent the same animal. Regardless of which side of the debate you fall on, Dracorex remains one of the most fascinating skulls ever discovered, and in these parks it is its own species that we get to have a full family unit here in Katsuyama, Japan. I think you can kind of see as I'm building, but just so everyone's aware, I don't build everything linearly. I start in one space and I might migrate to different areas of the enclosure or things that we're working on as my attention drifts to those things. I just don't want to get bored while I'm building something here, and when I feel like there's a space that I can add to or I can elevate, I'm always going to go there, and then I might come back to something in the future. Regardless, I try to make sure the entire building that we're making is fully built out, so we have things like closets, storage units, this little display space that we have in the front. Everything in the park here has a little bit of some shade of purple in different spaces, because that's one of the colors that we started with our park here in Japan that makes it a little more unique. So there's always going to be some element of that color in all of our enclosures here. The rest of the park here is still very much a work in progress. We still have several carnivore habitats to rebuild and reintroduce, and If I'm being honest, my hope of having this entire park finished before the Rebirth expansion launched may have been a little ambitious. The reality is I just don't build as quickly as some creators do. Between work and life and the limited time I have available to dedicate to projects like this, I've learned that the best approach is to be patient and focus on making each area better than the last rather than rushing to the finish. So that being said, this park isn't going anywhere. You can expect regular updates not only on Katsuyama, but the rest of our campaign parks as we continue to expand, rebuild, and find new homes for all the dinosaurs that have been added since launch. But I'm not going to be able to get all this done before today when the Rebirth expansion actually came out. And speaking of the expansion, this adds a whole new exciting new layer to everything we're already doing on this channel. My goal has always been to treat these campaign parks as part of a larger Jurassic World, and I'd love to find a way to make Île Saint-Hubert part of the story as well. The challenge is that Rebirth takes place several years before the events of Evolution 3, so before I start rewriting history, I want to finish the campaign and see exactly where that story goes. Once we reach the end, I'll have a much better idea of how or if we can connect Île Saint-Hubert to the rest of the growing park network. If there's a way to make it fit naturally into the campaign and the broader park universe we're building here, I'm absolutely going to try. For now, though, the plan is simple. We're going to jump into the Rebirth campaign and experience it together. Feel free to follow along, share your tips and tricks, point out things I miss, or let me know what you do differently. And if you've already played through it, maybe try not to spoil everything immediately. I'm not sure how long the journey will take, but I'm excited to get started, and I think it's going to be a really fun addition to everything we're already building on this channel here. I think we're about done with everything for the dinosaur encounter space that we're going to have for the Dracorex, but then the next thing that I'm going to do next to it is I want to build some kind of a shed, garage area for our staff members to be able to get into the enclosure. And again, similar to Dimetrodon, I don't want to have something here that just looks like there's a gate here. I want to try to blend these gates into some of these enclosures here. So I'm going to be using part of the dinosaur encounter to help make sure everything is perfectly lined up. So we're going to take the fence in, add the gate, remove the fence. I actually started building off of the dinosaur encounter and then just separated it from the dinosaur encounter to make sure that it was all perfectly in line with all these walls that come around the side of it. And then we just start to build out the perimeter of what this garage area is going to look like. And then from there we can build the inside of it and start adding a little bit more dimension and some more detail to the inside of this to help bring this a little bit more to life. Got to make sure that we don't just have random walls. We want to make sure that it appears like there's going to be some rooms in here, even if we're not going to fill all of those out because that's excessive. And it's also going to get us up against the complexity meter that, again, is always going to be the bane of my existence playing this on PlayStation. But I'm not going to change that. We're going to keep adding to these and then continue to add little details here, like a little area for our staff to be able to go to that's going to be more fenced in here, and then putting a roof on the top of it. Once we get the dynamic lights and everything in here with the new update here that we just got today, we'll be able to add some more here so that we can actually see in during the daytime. But there is areas here where the natural light can come in regardless. We're going to add a few details to the sides of some of these buildings here. You don't want to have these breaks where the windows actually come in. It doesn't look like there's much there as far as dimensions, so I want to make sure we add some of that brick on the side of that to really bring that out, and I feel like give it a little bit more sense of realism. And we hadn't even touched the actual fencing around this space here. So we're going to make a really simple fence here with some pieces of cement and then some gates here that we're just going to color. And then we just want to make sure that we have a little bit more dimension to the inside of our Dracorex habitat here. And then also we'd like the path to go up a little bit. I want to make sure that we have a little bit of elevation in here in this park here. And as we're going out to the front of it, when we do some more stuff with some of the carnivores on the outside, I'm expecting to have a lot more elevation outside of here, but I like to slowly drift up here as we're getting up towards the rest of where these carnivores are going to be. And I've got a ton of ideas for what that's going to look like, but again, it's not going to be today, it's not going to be tomorrow, it's probably going to be later this week. We'll start adding some more of those here, and I'll share them here on the channel. We are going to start playing with the inside of this here. We're going to have the water that we need here. I know some of the needs that we're going to have for the Dracorex, but before we get into all of that, I want to make sure that none of our Dracorex can actually get out of this enclosure here. So we're going to build a very light rock wall on one side of it here. We're going to go over the top of it as well with a what's the word called? A deck over that side of it. But before that, we should just smooth out some of this this path over here, and then building out a little bit more of these walkways here. I rarely end up using like one line of walkway and path here. I always end up using larger courtyard areas, and I don't know if that's what everyone's doing, but I feel like it just makes the park look better, so I do it a ton. But like I said, we do want to make sure we have some kind of a deck over on this side of it here. Another way that we're going to be able to view the Dracorex here. So we're just going to change the color of some of our wetlands, floorboards, and then I'm going to use some of this corrugated fencing or wall, and then take that around 3 sides of it. We're going to use a little bit of it on the front where people would go in, but then we'll make sure we leave plenty of spaces here for some stairs that will go up into the actual deck here. We're going to make a few of our own custom planter boxes here as well to try to fill this space out a little bit, and then we'll add some foliage and a few things inside of it. And then the challenge with some of these staircases here is I don't want them to have little gaps in them, but also I hate when they're up against each other and I can see all of the little pixels talking to each other. So we're just going to knock it down a little bit and then make it look, it's really close, but they're not perfectly level. But it does help so that none of the little graphic pixels start yelling at each other. We're using a lot of this, what's it called, the position snap to go around the outside of this because the top of the corrugated walls suck. And so we need to make sure we have something on the top of them. I'll play with the inside of it too. We'll have on those parts of it, we have some like wood pieces as well to really bring out and cover every piece of those walls that need a little bit of extra TLC. And then we'll just play with a few of these planter boxes here. We're going to add the same tree on both of these. I tried to use another one, but instead we'll just change the size of each one of them and then take one of them a little bit lower. I like these trees here. I don't feel like we use them too much, but once I had one of them here, there just wasn't another tree that I felt like really made sense in the box right next to it. But we've got both of these boxes for our trees here, and then we'll use some bushes on both sides of this here. We're just going to add a few other small details here and then play with the environment needs inside the actual enclosure here to just wrap it up. But I personally love how both of these came together. Like I mentioned, we went away from the traditional viewing galleries and instead let some of the path logic do the work of bringing the guests to our dinosaurs. I think the dinosaur encounter building here is the highlight of this part of the park, so I'll leave you with the build code for that if you'd like to use it or rebuild it or whatever you'd like to do. Back again shortly to expand this park and also dive into the Rebirth expansion. Until then, enjoy the game, and I will see you on the next build.